I've been babysitting since I was 16, and I can tell you one thing with absolute certainty. Parents don't tell you everything. Sometimes it's because they don't know. Sometimes it's because they're hoping nothing will happen on your shift. And sometimes it's because they know exactly what's in their house, and they're counting on you not finding out. These are 3 true stories from babysitters who learned the hard way that some houses have secrets. And some of those secrets don't stay hidden for long. I was 19 when I took a babysitting job for the Hendersons. It was February, cold enough that you could see your breath inside their garage when Mrs. Henderson walked me through the house. She was in her late 30s, blonde, put together in that suburban mom way, but there was something off about how she kept glancing at her husband while she talked. Like she was making sure she wasn't forgetting something important. Their daughter, Sophie, was only 18 months old. Too young to talk, barely walking, the kind of age where babysitting is more about keeping them alive than keeping them entertained. Mrs. Henderson showed me the nursery upstairs. It was painted pale yellow with a white crib in the corner, stuffed animals lined up on a shelf, and one of those fancy baby monitors on the dresser. The kind with a camera that connects to your phone. She handed me her old iPhone, already logged into the Monitor app, and said, "You'll want to keep this with you. Sophie's a good sleeper, but if she wakes up, you'll hear her on this before she really starts crying." I nodded. Standard stuff. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "Just don't watch the monitor between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. The camera glitches during that hour. Something about the Wi-Fi router resetting. It'll show weird stuff, visual artifacts, things that aren't really there. We've been meaning to get it fixed, but honestly, it's easier to just ignore it." I thought it was a weird thing to say, but I nodded again. Mr. Henderson was already standing by the door with his coat on, clearly ready to leave. They were going to some work event a couple hours away and wouldn't be back until morning. She handed me 2 20s and said, "There's more when we get back. Thank you so much for doing this on short notice." They left, and the house went quiet in that specific way houses do when you're alone in them. I spent the first few hours on the couch, scrolling my phone, checking the monitor every now and then. Sophie was asleep, a tiny lump under a blanket, totally still. Around 11 p.m., I went upstairs to check on her in person, just to make sure. She was fine, breathing steady, little fist curled up near her face. I went back downstairs. By 1:30 a.m., I was starting to fade. I'd made myself coffee earlier, but it wasn't helping much. I had the monitor phone sitting on the couch next to me, screen facing up. I could see the live feed of the nursery, Sophie still asleep, the room dark except for the glow of a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. At 1:58 a.m., I watched the timestamp on the monitor tick forward. I remembered what Mrs. Henderson said about the glitch between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m., and part of me was curious. I figured I'd see some pixelated nonsense, maybe the camera would freeze or cut out. I kept watching. At exactly 2 a.m., the video feed flickered. Just once. Then it stabilized. Sophie was still in the crib. But now there was someone else in the room. It was a woman. Tall, thin, standing near the corner by the window. The camera quality wasn't great, but I could make out enough. She was wearing a long dress or nightgown, something pale and old-fashioned. Her hair hung down in front of her face. She wasn't moving, just standing there, completely still, facing the crib. I sat up fast, my heart kicking into overdrive. I stared at the screen, waiting for the image to glitch out, waiting for it to be the visual artifact Mrs. Henderson mentioned. But the woman didn't disappear. She didn't flicker. The feed was perfectly stable. I grabbed the phone and stood up, already moving toward the stairs. My brain was trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was a trick of the shadows. Maybe the nightlight was casting something weird on the wall. But I knew what I saw. That was a person. I climbed the stairs as quietly as I could, my hands shaking. The nursery door was half open, the way I'd left it earlier. I stopped just outside and listened. No sounds. No movement. I pushed the door open slowly and stepped inside. The room was empty. Just Sophie in her crib, still asleep. No woman. No one standing by the window. I walked over to the corner where I'd seen her on the monitor. Nothing. I checked the closet, behind the door, even under the crib, feeling ridiculous but needing to be sure. There was no one. I pulled out the monitor phone again and checked the live feed. The image showed exactly what I was seeing now. An empty nursery, a sleeping baby, no one else. I stood there for a full minute, trying to make sense of it, and then I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Sleep deprivation, the power of suggestion, whatever. I went back downstairs. I did not look at the monitor again for the next 40 minutes. I kept it screen down on the couch, telling myself I was done checking it until morning. But at 2:52 a.m., I couldn't help it. I flipped the phone over. The woman was back. This time she was closer to the crib, standing right next to it. Her head was tilted down like she was looking at Sophie. One of her hands was reaching toward the railing. I didn't think. I just ran. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my pulse hammering in my ears, and I burst into the nursery, ready to scream, ready to grab Sophie and run. The room was empty again. But this time, something was different. The crib mobile was spinning. Slowly. Like someone had just touched it. I scooped Sophie up out of the crib. She woke up immediately and started crying, but I didn't care. I carried her downstairs, wrapped her in a blanket, and sat with her on the couch until the sun came up. I kept every light in the house on. I didn't look at the monitor again. When the Hendersons came home around 7 a.m., Mrs. Henderson saw me sitting there with Sophie still in my arms and her face changed. She didn't ask what happened. She just said, very quietly, "You saw her, didn't you?" I nodded. Mr. Henderson looked at his wife, and I could see something pass between them. Guilt, maybe. Or resignation. Mrs. Henderson sat down across from me and said, "The previous owner's daughter died in that room. Long time ago, before we bought the house. We didn't know at first. But after we moved in, things started happening. The monitor was the worst. Always between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. We've had 4 babysitters before you. They all quit after one night." I handed Sophie back to her and stood up. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Mrs. Henderson pressed 5/20s into my hand, more than we'd agreed on, and said, "I'm sorry. We should have told you." I never went back, and I never babysat again. When I was 17, I babysat for a family called the Pritchards. They had one kid, a boy named Miles who was 7 years old. Nice kid. Polite, quiet, the kind who says please and thank you without being reminded. His parents were both doctors, and their house was one of those new builds in a neighborhood where every lawn looked the same and every mailbox matched. The first time I babysat Miles, his mom, Dr. Pritchard, walked me through the house and pointed out the usual things. Snacks in the pantry, bedtime at 8:30. His iPad was already set to kid mode. But when we got to the hallway upstairs, she stopped in front of a door at the very end. It was white, same as all the others, but there was a sliding bolt lock on the outside. The kind you'd see on a bathroom stall. She didn't touch the door. She just looked at it and said, "This is the playroom." It's locked and it stays locked. Miles knows he's not allowed in there, and neither are you. Don't open it. Don't go inside. If Miles asks about it, just tell him no. I asked why, because that felt like a reasonable question. She hesitated, then said, "We're renovating. There's exposed wiring and some sharp tools. It's not safe." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? People renovate rooms all the time. She didn't bring it up again, and neither did I. That first night went fine. Miles ate his dinner, we played a card game, I put him to bed, and his parents came home around 11 p.m. They paid me in cash and asked if I could come back the following week. I said yes. The second time I babysat, Miles was acting different. Not bad, just off. He kept looking down the hallway toward the playroom door, even when we were downstairs. At one point, while we were eating pizza in the kitchen, he asked, "Do you ever hear it?" I asked him what he meant. He said, "The playroom. At night. It sounds like someone's playing in there." I told him it was probably just the house settling, old pipes, something like that. He stared at me for a second, then went back to his pizza and didn't bring it up again. I figured he was just trying to spook me, the way kids do. But later, after I'd put him to bed and gone back downstairs, I started paying attention to the sounds in the house. And he was right. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard something from upstairs. A faint thud like something being dropped. Then a creaking sound. Then nothing. I turned the TV off and listened. For a few minutes it was silent. Then I heard it again. A scraping noise like furniture being dragged across a floor. It was coming from upstairs. From the direction of the playroom. I went up to check, telling myself it was nothing, maybe something in the attic or the walls. When I got to the hallway, I stopped. The playroom door was still closed, the bolt still locked. But I could hear something on the other side. Footstep. Small, quick footstep. Like a child running. I stood there, frozen, listening. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard a voice. It was faint, muffled by the door, but it sounded like a little girl laughing. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding, and went to check on Miles. He was asleep, curled up on his side, exactly where I'd left him. I went back downstairs and sat on the couch, staring at my phone, trying to decide if I should text Dr. Pritchard. But what would I even say? I heard a kid laughing in your locked playroom? That sounded insane. I didn't text her. I just waited for them to come home. When they did, Dr. Pritchard asked how everything went. I almost told her. Almost. But I looked at her face, tired and polite, and I just said, "Fine." Everything was fine. She smiled, paid me, and I left. The third time I babysat was 2 weeks later. I almost said no when she called, but the money was good and I didn't have a better excuse. This time, Miles didn't mention the playroom at all. He was back to being his normal, quiet self. We watched a movie. He went to bed without any fuss, and I went downstairs feeling like maybe I'd overreacted last time. But at 10:15 p.m., I heard it again. Footstep. Running. Coming from the playroom. And this time, I also heard a voice. Clearer than before. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, calling out, "Come play with me. Please. I'm lonely." I grabbed my phone and went upstairs. I stood in front of the playroom door, my hand hovering over the bolt lock. Every logical part of my brain was screaming at me not to open it. But I needed to know. I needed to see what was inside. I slid the bolt open. The lock clicked, loud in the quiet hallway. I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room was completely empty. No furniture. No toys. No exposed wiring or tools like Dr. Pritchard had said. Just a bare wooden floor and blank walls. And in the center of the room, drawn in what looked like chalk, was a circle. Inside the circle were symbols I didn't recognize, and in the middle of the symbols was a single child's handprint. I backed out of the room, slammed the door, and locked it again. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely slide the bolt back into place. I went downstairs, grabbed my jacket, and texted Dr. Pritchard. "I'm sorry. I have to leave. Family emergency." I didn't wait for her to respond. I walked out the front door and sat in my car in the driveway until I saw their headlights pull in 20 minutes later. Dr. Pritchard got out of the car and came over to my window. I rolled it down. She didn't ask what happened. She just looked at me and said, "You opened it, didn't you?" I nodded. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and said, "We had a daughter. Before Miles. Her name was Iris. She died in that room when she was 5. It was an accident. We tried to move past it, but she's still there. We know she is. We keep it locked because it's the only way to keep her contained." I didn't say anything. What could I say? Dr. Pritchard handed me the cash through the window and said, "Please don't come back." I never did. The last family I ever babysat for lived in an older house on the edge of town, the kind of place that looked like it had been added onto over the years without much of a plan. The parents, Greg and Anna, had 3 kids, 2 boys, ages 9 and 6, and a baby girl who was maybe 10 months old. I was 21, home from college for the summer, and I needed the money. Anna gave me the tour when I arrived. The boys shared a room upstairs, the baby slept in a crib in the master bedroom, and the kitchen had leftovers I could heat up. Everything seemed normal until we got to the basement door. It was in the hallway near the kitchen, painted the same beige as the walls, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Anna opened it and flicked on the light. A wooden staircase led down into a half-finished basement. I could see a couch, a TV on a stand, some storage boxes stacked against the walls. She said, "The boys like to play down here sometimes. If they ask to go down, that's fine. Just make sure you go with them. And if you go down there for any reason, don't turn the TV on. It doesn't work right. It's old. We're getting rid of it soon." I asked what she meant by, "doesn't work right." She paused, looked at Greg, then back at me. "It just plays static. Really loud static. Hurts your ears. Not worth the headache." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Greg was already heading toward the front door, clearly ready to leave. They were going to a wedding 2 hours away and wouldn't be back until late. Anna reminded me one more time not to turn on the TV, then they left. The boys, Ethan and Kyle, were easy. We played outside for a while, then came in and had dinner. The baby went down without a fuss around 7 p.m. By 8:30, both boys were in bed. I went back downstairs and turned on the living room TV, keeping the volume low. Around 9:45 p.m., I heard something. A faint sound like voices, coming from somewhere in the house. I muted the TV and listened. It was coming from below me. From the basement. I stood up and walked to the basement door. I opened it and listened. The sound was clearer now. It was the TV. The one Anna told me not to turn on. It was on. And it wasn't playing static. It was playing a voice. A man's voice, talking low and steady, like a news anchor or a narrator. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was calm, almost hypnotic. I went down the stairs slowly, each step creaking under my weight. The basement was dim, lit only by the glow of the TV screen. The television was old, one of those boxy tube TVs from the 90s with fake wood paneling on the side. The screen showed static, black and white and crackling, but the voice was still coming from the speakers. I walked closer. As I got nearer, the static on the screen started to shift. It wasn't random anymore. It was forming shape, blurry but shape. I could see the outline of a room, a chair, and someone sitting in the chair. The voice from the TV said, "You shouldn't be down here." I stopped. My whole body went cold. The voice wasn't coming from a recording. It was responding to me. I took a step back. The image on the screen shifted again. The person in the chair stood up. I couldn't see their face, just a silhouette, but they were walking toward the screen. "Toward me," the voice said. "She told you not to turn it on." I said out loud, "I didn't." It was already on. The figure stopped. For a moment, the static cleared just enough for me to see a face. A man's face. Middle-aged, hollow-eyed, expressionless. He stared directly at me through the screen and said, "Then someone else did." I heard a creak behind me. I spun around and saw Kyle standing at the bottom of the basement stairs in his pajamas. He was holding the remote. The TV remote. He looked at me and said, very quietly, "He wanted to talk to you." I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer. He just dropped the remote on the floor and ran back upstairs. I turned back to the TV. The screen was black now. Completely off. No static. No voice. Nothing. I unplugged the TV from the wall, grabbed the remote off the floor, and went back upstairs. Kyle was already in bed, facing the wall, pretending to be asleep. I sat outside his room for the rest of the night, lights on, door open, not moving until I heard Greg and Anna's car pull into the driveway around midnight. When Anna came inside, she saw me sitting in the hallway and immediately asked if something happened. I told her about the TV, about the voice, about Kyle. She didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. She said, "The man who lived here before us died in that basement. Heart attack, sitting in front of that TV. We didn't know when we bought the place. We found out later. We've tried to get rid of the TV, but every time we take it to the curb, it ends up back in the basement. We don't know how. We stopped trying." I asked her why she didn't just destroy it. She said, "We're afraid of what he'll do if we do." Greg handed me double what they'd promised to pay me. I took it and left. I never went back. And I never babysat again. So those were 3 true babysitting horror stories that still make me check over my shoulder. If you've had your own creepy babysitting experience, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you made it this far, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. There are plenty more terrifying true stories coming your way. Until next time, stay safe out there.